Wonderful. Good evening. It is Tuesday, June 2nd. This is a special Board of Education meeting, which has been called so that the Board of Education can hear from the administration and have a discussion around a couple of different topics while we are dealing with a COVID-19 pandemic. So I am going to turn it over to Dr. Freeman.
Thank you, Dr. Balistraci, and thank you, board members, for making yourselves available tonight. As we discussed a couple of weeks ago, I do think that we're going to continue to hold special meetings on our off regular weeks, just so that we can continue a series of COVID-19 updates. This week specifically, we'd like to bring you up to speed on two issues, taking chronologically. That would be graduation plans for our current 12th graders, and it would then be beginning of plans for summer school. So starting with the graduation, I'll dive right in and get the conversation started. As you are aware, we shared a communication with the community, publishing the plans that we had put together for a graduation event. On the heels of that communication, we probably received approximately 50 emails. Now that represents a little less than 20% of the senior class. Some of the emails were appreciative of the plans that were put in place. A very small number actually thought that the plan was too liberal, that it was going to be dangerous, the plan that we had put together, that it would in fact encourage transmission of COVID-19. The vast majority of those emails, however, were very much concerned that the plans were too restrictive, that they were overly cautious, overly conservative, and that they were not celebratory enough of our seniors and understanding enough of the losses that these seniors have experienced in the back end of their senior year. I want the community to be aware that the driving force behind that design was first safety. We had worked with some student leaders. We had worked with faculty at the high school. We had worked with the high school administration took lead on the design. We had also worked with the local police department and the local health authorities in that design. The idea behind the design was to prioritize having all of our kids together at one moment in time, at one place in time. On the heels of the communications, however, we decided that we wanted to revisit the plan. It was clear that we had missed something and we wanted to look again at the plan. So over the last several days, that has been going on. Last Thursday and Friday, Mr. Masenti invited every senior at the high school into a conversation with him and with Donna Podlinski. Donna is the assistant principal for the 12th grade. Over Thursday and Friday, they spoke with close to 100 of the students who took them up on that offer and joined them in conversations to talk about what they would like to see changed in those graduation plans. Yesterday, Rick and I met with Dennis Johnson, the local public health authority, to review the suggestions that had come in the email communications and from those conversations with students. Additionally, yesterday, Rick and I met with the extended graduation team at the high school. This morning, I met with Chief Hyatt of the Guilford Police Department to talk about the suggestions that had been made to the plan. This afternoon, I met at the fairgrounds with members of the graduation team from the high school to walk the fairgrounds. Chief Hyatt attended that meeting as well as representatives from the fairground. Tonight, we are talking with all of you, and where it stands right now is that we would like to, as early as tomorrow, to send out some options to the seniors. What we plan on getting out tomorrow would be a survey monkey that would ask the seniors what their preferences are from a slate of 3 options. The 3 options all have the approval of the local health authority, and I'd like to walk you through what those look like. Number 1 would be the plan that we had shared a week ago. So choice number 1 would be the drive-in as it was described in the communication that came from the high school administration a week ago. Option number 2 would be to maintain the drive-in event on Wednesday evening, June 17th, as previously designed, but to include a follow-on piece that would take place over the following Thursday and Friday, where seniors would come a second time to the high school, to the front end of the high school, in cap and gown, and pick up their diploma. They would have the opportunity to have a picture taken in cap and gown. They'd have an opportunity to come individually and retrieve their diploma, essentially creating the walk. And although it would not be across the stage, it would be across the front of the Guilford High School. Option 3 is the most revised plan. Option 3 would maintain the date of June 17th and the location of the fairgrounds. However, we would be moving from 9 p.m. to 6 p.m., which is our traditional graduation time, and we will be erecting a stage rather than a screen at the event. The event will still put all of us in the same time in the same place at the same time, but rather than watching a pre-recorded and produced graduation together, the graduation would take place in real time. Speeches will happen in real time. So speeches, at least all of the adult speeches, will be reduced. They'll be dramatically reduced. We'll each be speaking for about 60 seconds rather than the usual 60 minutes. I know it may feel like for attendees at the graduation, but Mr. Macenti and Dr. Balistraci and I will be speaking briefly. The student leaders and the valedictorian and salutatorian will still give their presentations in person from the stage. The shield will still be delivered in person in real time. The stage will only have one person on it at a time. Speakers will be coming one at a time to the stage to speak. The microphone will be disinfected in between each speaker. And then most importantly, when it is time for students to walk, we will call students out of their cars to walk. A significant change has taken place just in the last few days, in that public gatherings have increased from 5 to 25, a maximum of 25. What we will be doing is we will be calling out rows of students will still be in the cars with their families for the stage presentation. However, we will be calling students out of their cars 20 at a time to queue up at the proper social distancing on each side of the stage. They will then have the opportunity to progress across the stage, pick up their diploma case and in fact their gift bag that has been provided this year. And when they step down off of the stage, we will have a professional photographer there taking professional photographs. Students will need to wear masks as they queue up and as they progress across the stage. They will have the opportunity to remove the mask for the photo if they choose to. As each group of 20 returns to their cars, then another group of 20 will be called out. So every student will have the opportunity to walk across the stage. We'll be using the town band shell rather than our traditional stage that we erect on the green, primarily because it is taller and will provide for better visibility from cars rather than seating on the green, but also because it's larger and will allow us to spread out the materials. Obviously, we will not have the opportunity for graduates to shake hands with Mr. Macenti, Dr. Balistraci, and myself, but they will have the opportunity to walk and to have that professional photograph taken at graduation. Additionally, we've worked really closely with the Guilford Police, and so that we will also be finishing the event with a procession. I guess it would be a recession. As the event ends, the students will be led in their cars with their families from the fairgrounds with police escort north past the green and ultimately up to the high school on New England Road, where the procession will then disperse and students will head off and back home. The real focus, what Mr. Macenti heard clearly from the students in his conversations with them, was that the single thing that they were most disappointed about losing was the opportunity to walk. So in 2 of the 3 options that we're providing, we are giving them the opportunity to walk and receive a diploma as we do in a traditional setting. The second most important thing that the seniors expressed in their conversations was the priority of being together in one place at one time. And 2 of the 3 options maintain that in their entirety, and all 3 options maintain that for a significant portion. So again, we've done a lot of rethinking. There have been there have been amended executive orders issued since our first communication. We've done a lot of listening. And ultimately, we want to finish by giving the seniors the option of choosing their graduation. It's from a constricted palette. We understand that. We understand that none of these options address all of the suggestions that were made. None of them will be everything that our traditional graduation can be, but we think that we've got options that meet many of the needs that have been expressed, both by parents and by students over this last week and a half, I think it was, since we sent out our communication. Mr. Macenti is here in the call. I see that he's there, although he doesn't have his camera on. I know that the board was apprised of the plan originally. We wanted to make sure that you had an opportunity to hear the revisions and comment on them before the next step was taken. So we do have that opportunity to talk a little bit about where we find ourselves tonight and what we think the next. We hope to have the survey out by tomorrow or Thursday at the latest, to have the answers back from the students before the end of the week, and to have a final decision and communication out to the community by Friday or Monday at the latest. We will only be short few days away from graduation by the time we get to next Monday. So we want to make sure that we continue to move this conversation quickly. I know that Mr. Macenti and I both feel good that we had this opportunity to listen to the feedback, to hear from the students particularly, and to have some latitude to make these changes. I do want to express my appreciation both of Dennis Johnson and Chief Hyatt. They've been incredibly responsive and to the degree possible, I think flexible in working with us to make sure that our seniors feel special in these next few weeks. Rick, anything that you want to add before just talking about this with the board?
No, that was good.
Amy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, so first, just thank you to everyone that took the time to, the police, the town, obviously the administration, to really listen to the emails that we were getting and to get through these options. Two questions. One is probably an easy one. Have we adjusted the car situation for families that have different circumstances that would be uncomfortable?
Yes, thank you. I'm
different
sorry.
Households or
Yeah, I'm sorry that I skipped over that. So the plan is still built around the idea of one car per senior, but we are building an option in so that families who require a second car may request one. That would be done by request only. It would have to go through the high school. We do have some space limitations, although the fairgrounds are much better than having to do this in our own parking lot. But yes, if there are families who, for a variety of reasons, have been isolating in more than one location, we do want to provide them the option of a second vehicle so that they don't have to get into the same car. And I also failed to mention that the event happening at the fairgrounds will be live streamed to YouTube. So additional friends and family members will be able to watch from a distance. Every senior will have the ability to bring one car. Again, we're going to be very clear about this. This should be a family vehicle. You may not rent a limousine or a party bus, and attendees will need to be inside the vehicle. You cannot, as you can in some drive-ins, come in a pickup truck, park it backwards, and be in the bed. In fact, the executive order still calls for events like this to have people in the cars with the windows rolled up. Dennis Johnson has said that if everybody in the car is wearing a mask, there is some flexibility to that, but the cars are being used as isolating devices. And so the back of a pickup or the roof of a vehicle is not acceptable. You need to be inside your vehicle at the event. The communication this week or Friday will be a general communication, making the community aware of the broad strokes. The students will be receiving detailed directions for how graduation will work, as well as an instructional video that I believe the graduation team at the high school is putting together, since we will not be allowed to have a rehearsal as we normally do. This is usually a highly choreographed event, and it will be a little bit less so this year.
just quick, go ahead.
The only other adjustment, I think no, that was both. I had mentioned the windows and the second family car. I got both of those changes. Thank you.
And then the other quick question, because it popped up in a few of the emails, and I'm sure we all have the same question, and perhaps Mr. Macenti could speak to this. Are there other plans for, the quote senior week or senior anything, or is it just going to be this event and the parade?
Paul,
Or it may not have been decided.
are you speaking to that, Paul, or you want me?
I think that this is the primary event for graduation week. There have been award ceremonies and scholarship ceremonies that have taken place. Those have been primarily virtual in nature. Rick, I don't know if there's any other events that are going on.
There are several parents that I've put in touch with the senior class co-advisors and the senior class assistant principal in their graduation plans for banners, the parade. But we're going to, if option 3 is selected, there will be a parade. We didn't have a lot of interest in senior breakfast. That was hardly brought up in my conversations with all the students. And in fact, the one thing that there was a lot of discussion was, can we please find a way to sign yearbooks?
Oh, that's right. That's
so we have
important.
put that we have contracted with Jostens, who does our yearbook, and they are putting together, or already have put together, a virtual signing procedure for the kids. So they'll find out about that this week. And that'll be for every whatever option they select. We will build in a yearbook signing.
And a virtual yearbook signing event.
Right.
And there are going to be another couple of items that we're trying to just keep to ourselves until graduation day arrives, but those are the big events. Again, really difficult to schedule the regular events. These students, right, the senior outing, the senior breakfast, those are things that we simply cannot host without being unable to bring students together. Another suggestion that was made, I think there's been some confusion around the number for gatherings increasing to 150. There were some suggestions about doing an outdoor graduation, a non-car outdoor graduation, now that gatherings can be 150. We're shying away from that for a couple of reasons. One is that at the earliest, that could not be scheduled until after July 6th. We do have some students who will not be available. We've got some students who are enlisting in the military, or have early acceptance to college, or have other obligations this summer and would not be able to make that. But also it goes to that concern that the students raised about being in the same place at the same time. To do a graduation of 150, we would have to split the class in half. We would have to conduct 2 ceremonies, and that would allow for no guests. Even though we're using the cars as isolating devices, we do anticipate having a crowd of slightly over 1,000 people. We've got a class of 280. If every student has 3 other people in the car with them, we're going to have a group of slightly over 1,000 people gathered. To be able to host that number of people in chunks of 150 would not have the students together in the same place at the same time. And second only to walking, that was what they thought was most important. And so again, we know that this event is a compromise, but we feel that it's improved over what we put out a week and a half ago. Hey, John, I see John asking a question there.
Joe, I
I'm
think.
sorry. Yeah, I apologize.
Well, Paul, everyone, thanks very much for the information. One question that comes to mind, are we considering an alternate date in case of inclement weather? Has that been discussed, or is it the 17th and that's it?
Right now, we have a rain date of the 18th on hold. We'll just push it by 1 day if it rains on the 17th.
Got it.
Go ahead, Myra.
I'm sure we can't have a lot of control over this, but we always had this at the graduation night event for the seniors where, they all went to a collected place and they were safe, and there's a lot less concern for what might happen if there wasn't an event for them to all go to. And I know it's kind of out of our hands, but is there any communication being sent to parents or guardians with regards to graduation night? And I mean, I know it's really not our place, but it's like the first thing I thought of when I thought, if these kids are going to be so anxious to kind of celebrate and there's nowhere there for them to like safely collect, and they might make their own plans. So
Paul, can I address
Yeah,
that?
yeah, please do, Rick.
So this morning I was in communication with the chairman, Mrs. Paris, and I put her and her group in touch with our senior class co-advisors and Donna. They're working with the senior class officers right now on a design of a banner, where to hang it in town, and some other things. So she acknowledged that she was getting in touch with Donna. Donna acknowledged they had touched base. So we're going to try to involve them in anything we can do over the next couple of weeks.
But Moira, yes, there will be communications going out about safe behavior as well. So around our event, Dennis is going to require that we get communications out to the community at large. If people choose to be outdoors to line the route of the procession, we will be reminding them that they need to be masked and follow appropriate social distancing guidelines. In the procession, the police chief has some very strict requirements for behavior from within cars. We cannot have students standing out of sunroofs or hanging out of windows or sitting in the back of a pickup. So there will be guidelines around how to behave in the processional. And yes, we will be reminding families that families should be practicing appropriate social distancing and isolation even on the night of graduation, and they should be making safe decisions for their, right? We create Project Graduation so that we can have all of our seniors in one safe space. Since we can't do that, we will remind families to help their students make good choices during this both celebratory and disappointing week for them. So yes, we'll be putting that reminder out for sure.
Dick, go ahead.
What are we missing? That is, with all the alternatives that we were sent, scenario 3, I suspect, will be overwhelmingly favored. In fact, it sounds like certainly number 1, if not 2, are sort of false choices. And so it feels a little bit disingenuous. That's number 1. And number 2, of all the suggestions that were made to us based on what they think other people are doing, what have we left out that we could do but have decided not to? For example, one of the scenarios was that graduates could stand outside their cars with their cap and gowns on while their family stayed in the cars, so that the only thing so all the graduates would see each other and would be hearing things live that way without having to listen to the radio. I'm trying to think of other things that people wanted us to do that we can anticipate still may be an issue for which we either have a good response or we incorporate them.
Yeah,
I'll piggyback a little bit on that, Dick. I think it's going to be a natural tendency for families and students to compare what we're doing to neighboring communities.
Yep.
So, where I think, along with Dick's question, where do we kind of align with our neighboring districts?
Yeah, so to both of those, I'll start. We tested many of the other suggestions, Dick. So that one in particular, the health officer will not sign off on that one because that would be a gathering of more than 25 people, not isolated by the car in one public place. And so he does not have the ability to call that okay. The reason that we're calling groups of 20 out is because essentially you've only got, and in fact, the reason we're calling groups of 20 and not 25 will be because of the staff that we have on site. So essentially, we will only have around 25 people ever exposed or moving through the site at any one time while everybody else remains isolated in the cars. So the idea of having even all the graduates out goes well beyond that number of 25, which we're operating under now, and even well beyond the 150 that we'd be at a later time. The other suggestions that came in, the one that came in, I think probably the most often, was the suggestion of delaying the event and having the event in July or August with the hopes that there will be fewer limitations then. I was part of a phone call with the commissioner and superintendents from around the state and a state epidemiologist who strongly recommended against that. And so while there are some communities that are going in that direction, essentially he felt like that was rolling the dice. He would not go on record saying, yes, things will certainly be better and there will be fewer restrictions in the future. And that bumps up against our seniors who we know will lose some. We will not have all of our students available to us. And the later we go into the summer, the more we will have who end up missing that event. And so that was why we shied away from that one. Jonathan, this new plan becomes very similar to what Madison is doing. Madison has a plan that looks very similar to what option 3 represents. They are hosting theirs in their parking lot, however, rather than, I believe that we've got a friendlier location to use in the fairgrounds than they have in their parking lot. Our parking lot is also a little more problematic than theirs would be for a similar event. I'm trying to think of other suggestions. Those were the biggest ones that we looked at. And the reason for maintaining the first one, we did talk about whether or not we should have this option or not, but we reminded ourselves that from a class of about 280, we received about 50 communications. We worry that by taking option 1 off the table, that there might be people who are quietly appreciative of an event that is more restrictive and more restrained. And so I don't disagree with your prediction, but we didn't want to take away what we had presented as the ceremony without giving people a vote to support it if there is support for that one. And while the feedback that we heard was clear in one direction, we recognized that we hadn't heard from a majority of the even in the interviews with Rick, we had close to 100 students who participated. We didn't have the full class participate, although they were all invited. We certainly haven't heard from every parent in the community. So again, I don't think anybody disagrees with the prediction, but we wanted to leave the option there at least to test it.
So it seems to me that that response suggests a communications strategy that when this goes out, it might be useful to explain why the 3 scenarios so that people don't see this as a political charade. The rationale for doing it makes good sense. And that there were some options that we got from the community that we're not going to do for the reasons that you gave. And even saying that in the communication helps to preempt people starting to second guess what you're sending out to them.
Yep, exactly right. The other thing that we'll be doing is that there will be a communication going out first to all the parents in the community, alerting them that this choice is coming, and only later will the actual survey go out to the senior class. We know that in some families, this will be the student's decision, but in many households, graduation is a family event as much as an individual event. And so we want all the families to be alerted, 1, to all the rationale and reasoning that we're following. And 2, we're not just sending this out to all of our seniors, their families are included in this conversation as well.
And
Mary,
Paul,
sorry, go ahead, John. No,
sorry.
go ahead.
My question is, was there any thought given to whether or not the parade should happen before the ceremony? And I say that only because my concern is this disbursement that would happen after. And that's, that to me has the makings of a public gathering of way too many people when people get to the high school and may potentially get out of their cars. So,
Yes.
Was there any thought to saying meet at the high school and then have a procession to the ceremony where people could line the streets, people could say hi from their homes, and then have the ceremony where they disperse from there?
That was in fact the original design if we were to have a 9 p.m. event. And if option 1 or option 1 or 2 maintain the choice, then that is likely the way it will go. The police department is very concerned about having a procession between 5 and 6 p.m. crossing Route 1 on a Wednesday afternoon. And so the 8 o'clock time works much better from a police department perspective. And so we're working on having the procession or recession at a time that will be less intrusive to the community. And it'll be before or after, depending on where the event takes place. So I just changed my audio source. Can you all still hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So essentially the police department's going to make that decision based on which option our students choose.
Mary, you had a question?
Paul, I was wondering if you could expand on the second option, especially in terms of how the students will get their diploma. Are you calling them out of cars at that point? How are they all accepting their diploma? And also, sort of, how did that idea, come about?
I apologize for that. My battery died.
Did
Oh,
you?
we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm back. I couldn't hear you for a second, but I have you now. I answered John's question. Was there another question?
Yes,
I hope
sorry,
I answered
Mary.
John's question. I tried to answer it.
Yeah.
Mary, go ahead.
Paul, I'm asking about the option number 2.
Yep.
Can you just expand a little bit about how the students would actually get their diploma with option number 2? And also, I'm interested in hearing how that option, how that came about, how that idea came up.
It continues to build off of what option 1 is built on, which is primarily the priorities of distancing. Everybody's completely isolated in option 1. There's no interaction that occurs at the fairgrounds. You're in your car, you watch a pre-recorded presentation, and then you leave from the fairgrounds in your car. The way the diplomas will be distributed is that students will be given assigned times spread across 2 days. They will come by car into the bus loop at the front of the high school. They will step out of their car. If there are family members in the car with them, family members may stay at the car while the student comes out in cap and gown, progresses across the front of the high school to pick up diploma. A photograph can be taken. So again, that one prioritizes more highly the priority of distancing and isolating. So we're all together at the fairgrounds, but completely isolated. The students have the ability to walk, but they do that individually. The students don't get to see each other walk. One student might be walking at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. The last student might not be walking until 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. So again, there's different priorities that happen. Number 1, again, is there because it is the most conservative and most isolating, although everybody's in one place and time. Number 2 maintains that, but tries to add the concern the students raised about being able to walk and get a photograph taken without giving away any of those epidemiological guardrails. And then number 3 really does shift the priority a little bit. It is less conservative, it is less isolated, but much more built around community and being together. All the students get to walk and all the students get to witness each other walk in option number 3. Option number 2 looks a little bit more like what Branford is doing. They're having graduation in pieces and parts. Option number 3 looks very much like what Madison is doing. Option number 1 is being replicated in a number of districts across the state, although not as many as what option number 3 looks like to have moved to. And there are 4 districts in the state that are doing completely virtual graduations, where students are home and they're simply watching a graduation event on YouTube, similar to the way UConn and other universities graduated. So there's a broad distribution, and the plan that we're putting together falls both literally and figuratively between what's happening in Branford and Madison right now, it looks like.
Well, I had a couple questions. One, how will people in cars in row 10 hear? So there will be both a microphone and streaming?
So that's a really good question. There will be microphones, but there will not be speakers at the event. The microphones will be broadcast through a FM radio station.
Okay.
The cars will be able to tune to the FM radio station. So the microphones will both be broadcast live streamed to YouTube, the way this event is, and they will be simulcast through an FM radio station. So at the event, you'll be able to see what's happening on the stage and you'll hear the amplification through your car speakers.
Second question, not a fun one. Are we doing any monitoring before people walk across the stage? Are we asking people who have a temperature or a cough to stay home? Are we, I mean, in lots of places right now, your temperature gets taken before you enter, whether it's your workplace or anything. What?
Yeah, Dennis didn't feel that was necessary. So communications will probably remind people that if they have symptoms and specifically a fever, that they should be staying at home. But no, we won't be taking temperatures. I'm not sure if I highlighted enough. When the students exit their cars, they will be directed to keep 6 feet distance from each other and to wear a mask. We will have additional masks on hand so that if a graduate shows up without one, we will provide one. But again, families are to be in their cars, windows are to be up or masks are to be worn. And any time that the graduates are out of the vehicle, they are to be masked and they are to be maintaining 6-foot distancing. We will have marking provided at the approaches to the stages so that the students, even as they stage up, are maintaining 6-foot distancing. They will only be allowed to remove the mask for the few moments it takes to have their photograph snapped if they would prefer to have their photograph taken without the mask on.
Is there a reason that we can't have amplification? Only just thinking, we're going to need to have AAA on site if everyone turns their car off and has their accessory running on their car, their battery runs out for 2 hours.
I can look into it. I don't know if there's a reason that you can't both pump it through speakers and have it, but the primary source will be through FM radio, which is an important point, right? Because if we just need to make sure everybody's coming with a car that has a working radio in it. If all you have is Sirius, I don't know if it works. You've got to actually have a working FM receiver in your car. So that is an important reminder. I can look into that, Amy. We'll touch base with the technology company, with the vendor that's providing the system. We do have a noise ordinance waiver so that we have permission to make a little bit of noise. We do anticipate that there's going to be some horn honking that takes place.
Piggybacking on Katie's point, it wouldn't be too surprising if a few, if not more than a few cars stepped out of their cars during what's the enforcement procedure whereby the actual enforcement may cause a bigger ruckus. It is, things like that can be disturbing in the sense that it can cascade. And so what's the thinking about?
There will be high school staff as well as myself on site. And if somebody or a family steps out of the car, we will first very politely and very friendly ask them to return to the vehicle, remind them that we need to. If it became too distracting, we could, of course, stop the event and wait until everybody returned to their cars if we needed to. And finally, there will be Guilford police on site. I do not know if Dennis Johnson plans on attending, but the health director has the authority to shut down any event if he feels that it's creating a threat. But the plan is that we will remind everybody of the rules and encourage everybody to make it a friendly and a cooperative event. And that's always happened. That same concern exists at any graduation. There will be noisemakers or car horns or a disturbance. And we just smile and pause and wait until everybody's ready. And then we get back to the business at hand. It's not been an issue in the past. And I expect that the community will rise to this occasion, although there will be some of us on hand to remind people if necessary. Guilford Police will be present. They'll be present during the event as they are at every graduation and present to lead the procession at the end. But I do not anticipate that they will need to interact with families during the event.
Paul, quick question. So if we're to presume that most likely option 3 will be the one with the most support.
Yep.
What do we offer for students or families that aren't comfortable with that and decide that, there may be a family member who just is immunocompromised or, it's just even the student themselves. So with that third, will there be a caveat with all of these that if somebody's not comfortable, attending a live event like that, that they have the option to receive their diploma in another way?
Yes, so the immediate alternate is that there will be a broadcast alternate for each of the three. Either if we're present watching the presentation on the big screen, that presentation will be live streamed at the same time, so that you could either watch it with everybody or watch it from home. And the actual event, the live event, option number 3, should that occur, it will be live streamed so that you could participate from home. And then if a so family members could certainly, and we know that not every, when we're on the green, the number of family members who may attend is unlimited. That's not so. We know that we'll be limiting family members. So we know that family members will watch from home. If there are students who are unable or uncomfortable attending on the fairground, they will be able to watch it. And yes, there would be arrangements made similar to option number 2 for them to be
Okay.
able to come in and pick up a diploma, even privately and individually. And one of the officials of the school system or district would be happy to meet a family individually and deliver that diploma if they couldn't be there or were uncomfortable being there. And again,
Okay,
that's
yeah.
the reason for maintaining number 1, but we can't run option 1 and option 2 and option 3 and have everybody in the same place at the same time. So it will be a choice that we make as a community, and then there will be a virtual option for every one of them with personal additional arrangements made if necessary.
Paul, what is the thought in truncating the speeches?
So having everybody usually on the green, there are also lots of, I apologize, but portalets on the green. So one of the reasons for trying to keep the event short is to avoid concerns that Dr. Hirsch was getting at. If this runs to its usual 2.5, 3 hours, if I'm telling one of my yarns, then we're going to be testing people's abilities to remain in their car and not get out and move around. There will be facilities. We will have a couple of portalets. There will be custodians manning them. They will be cleaned in between every use, but we're hoping to limit anybody's need to use those. We're also concerned about sitting in a car rather than sitting on our beautiful green for 2 hours. And so we're just trying to accommodate the comfort factor by keeping it shorter than normal. Quite honestly, I don't think anyone is going to be disappointed that my speech is shorter. Again, I want to highlight, we are only asking the adults to shorten our speaking time. We are not asking our student speakers to shorten their speaking time. And that's what the students remember. They remember what their peers say to them. They do not remember what gray-haired old men say to them.
A question, will we as speakers be wearing masks? You mentioned microphone. I'm thinking leaving airborne particles in the air and then having 280 people walk through it. The public health person in me is asking that question.
So the plan for now was that we would wear our masks while we were off the stage, and that in front of the microphone, we thought we would remove the mask if necessary for speaking, but disinfect the microphone. I'm happy to have that conversation further with Dennis and other public health officials. And if we think we need to keep our masks on, then we will keep our masks on even at the microphone.
Okay.
We are working to try, there's going to be student speakers, some adult speakers, all speaking from the stage. And then there will be 2 teachers who call the roll. Those will be happening from distant microphones. So yeah, we can spend more time making sure that we get that right. And
when
then
you talk to the person or whoever the broadcast company is, why don't you just ask for 5 microphones?
or different covers, but to Katie's point,
Yeah.
it's not just what is projected
It's all of us
on the
standing in the
microphone
same
cover.
spot. I'm thinking of the
Yes.
choir in California. If we're all in the same spot, talking one after the other, and then we're gonna have everyone walk across the same stage. I'm just thinking there
Yep.
may be simple ways to add an extra layer here.
Yeah, so keeping our masks on and delivering, our comments through the mask might certainly be something that we need to talk further about.
Is there a chance of making special masks that feature, whether it's GHS or whatever it says on, so that people actually would feel as if keeping it on, particularly when their pictures are being taken, would be a statement about what happened at their graduation in 2020. That is, rather than, in some sense, make a virtue of the crisis as opposed to it being a hindrance, aside from being a trinket.
Yeah, it was something that we spoke about, and there's a diversity of opinion on whether school logos on the masks is a positive or a negative way to go. There's a lot of vendors out there that are offering those. I know some schools that are embracing that. I know of other schools that have stayed away from the idea of purchasing masks with the school logo on it at all. There's a lot of strong opinions on both sides of that suggestion. At this point, that's not a direction that we've moved in.
Just as a sidebar, the crew team is doing it as a fundraiser. They're selling masks that have the Guilford High School emblem on them. So, and I know they've put a blast out. So I guess if kids choose to purchase them, they can. But
yeah, we've also already had the conversation. I think for sure, just as we see students who choose to decorate their mortar boards, we're going to see students who decorate masks. They're going to individualize masks regardless of whether they were starting from a platform that was consistent or not. I'm sure we're going to see decorated masks for graduation.
What was the other topic you wanted to cover
Well,
tonight?
okay, so Ted, before we go there, I would just like to take a minute. So this is obviously a survey that's going out to students to ask their opinion. Board of Ed members have had a chance to ask questions. This is not something we are voting on tonight, but I would like to give board members an opportunity to say a word or two just about their thoughts. I mean, I'm getting a sense based on some questions, but I would just like board members, if they would like to have an opportunity to just give their thoughts on where we are right now and the approaches mentioned.
I think I've probably made it fairly obvious that I feel good about option number 3. I mean, the governor has come out with these new guidelines. I think he's been guided by experts in their field, and I feel like he's been quite conservative during this in terms of the decisions he makes. You know, I think we can get a little more information from, you know, maybe Rob Nolfo or, you know, the health director in Guilford, you know, about the aerosolization of COVID-19, you know, after speaking and in an open space, and then we can figure out if you guys have to wear masks or what the best, but I would support 3.
Go ahead, Mary. Go ahead, Mary.
I just, I support the option that the students and families pick, and I really like the fact that you're going towards a survey and allowing public input and things like that. And I think it will help the students and the families to feel like they have more control at a time when they feel like they have, almost no control. And I think you're addressing that issue. So I support any decision that is ultimately picked, but I think all of the decisions are thoughtful, and I appreciate the time that was taken to create them.
Thank you.
As a parent of a senior, and I want to say this has been great, having all these options presented. And I know, as a parent, like I said, option 3 is going to be what works best for my family and for my son. The one concern I have, which John brought up earlier, which I agree, and I know, Paul, you explained it was a policing issue, was that parade. I too feel that it would be most beneficial having the parade prior to the event, so that there's more control as the influx and flow into the event, as opposed to after the event, where it just can get a little chaotic and maybe possibly rambunctious. I'm just stating, but I do support number 3 as.
I can certainly revisit that topic again with the local authorities.
Are there other board members who'd like to share their opinions on what we've heard?
I would
Well,
just reiterate what Mary said, and that, yes, as a board, we like to hear the options and weigh in, but ultimately it should be the students and families that tell us what option they feel is best suited for them. And I do agree with the parade, with what Joe pointed out and others have, is that if the parade comes before, there's a motivation for them to get to their destination and safely and in some sort of orderly fashion. But if it's after, you can't begrudge a bunch of seniors for wanting to kind of go a little nuts after their graduation and the parade through town at night, different hour, it just, I know it's complicated and I totally get the idea that Route 1 will be jammed up, but that would be my only input, is that I could see the glitches that could happen afterwards, understandably, but
Yeah, I'm happy to talk
thank
with
you
Chief Hyatt some more.
overall. I know this was hard, and I'm so glad that you guys were so thorough with getting so much input and considering everything.
Well, and I just want to, the credit for that goes to Mr. Macenti and his team. The feedback came back. There was clearly an opinion there. And I want to point out how much I appreciate Mr. Macenti and his team saying, we've got time. We can hear from our students, we can talk to the kids, and we can look at some other ideas. And then again, the goalposts continue moving as they do with everything with COVID-19. So in fact, a week later, we went from groups of 5 to groups of 25, and that gave us a little more opportunity to do some things at the fairgrounds and feel good about it. And so I really appreciate that. And I know that the team at the high school and I came away feeling really good about the process. So it wasn't the way we planned it, but we felt very good about it. Mary, to your point, I like the idea of giving the kids the final decision. We've worked up some options. There's at least some choice within the limitations that the town officials feel they need to set. And we all feel really good about it. And so I really appreciate Rick and his team taking the time and taking the step back to give it all a second look. Things are usually better if you give them a second look.
I agree with the way this has been presented. I think the giving people the option in the survey is very clever. I would also support the idea that the parade should be before rather than after. And I would point out that when we have it on the green, we close all the roads around the green for a significant period of time. I happen to live near the green, and I'm telling you that, when that happens or anything else on the green happens, you can just give up on your car and go walk someplace. I think that this is an important thing for the town. And yes, it's going to take a while to get all these cars across Route 1, but we're only trying to do this once a year. And I think that, a small sacrifice like that is something that the town ought to be prepared to make.
I'm hopeful that we're only doing it like this once, not once a year, but that's a fair comparison. Yep.
Any other board members want a chance to say something?
I just want to echo something that Dick mentioned earlier. I do think it's important that we explain the reasoning behind each of the 3 methods. And I think taking that a little bit further and making the option for students to do something in a more isolated, quarantined fashion and making that feel okay for them as a choice, I think is really important. I think we don't know what kids are dealing with in terms of parents who might have cancer or have other immunocompromised positions. And they're going to feel, I think, a tremendous amount of pressure if we wind up going with number 3 to participate. And I think we owe it to the families where that feels really uncomfortable. We do owe them a really honest, true option that's going to make them feel like, okay, this is also cool. Just because you're not doing number 3, option number whatever 4 is going to be just fine for you as well.
Yeah, it's a
I
good
appreciate that. Thank you for that comment. Our
Any
communication was sort of created that way, but we're going to take a look at it before we let it go. This has been helpful feedback, and we will look at it and make sure that it's clear and to those points before we release that tomorrow or Thursday.
Any other thoughts? All right, I'll just then share mine, which is, I think I have concerns about the parade as well, and I wonder if one option is we start graduation at 7 to give us a little more time for the parade beforehand. Just a thought. But I really, I think that this plan, the third option, relies on a lot of cooperation and high expectations of our graduates and their families. And I hope they follow through. But creating a situation that makes it a little harder when these kids have not seen each other in person for 3 months, it is just not a wise choice on our part. I think we should try to make sure that we create this opportunity for a parade, but don't create a problem for ourselves, for the town, and perhaps for some of them by all landing at the high school in the dark.
Well, and I
Where-
guess I just want to sort of test this. I just want to throw this option out. The parade wasn't one of the top 2 concerns that the students had suggested. This to Dr. Hirsch's point, this was something that was suggested in a number of the emails, and we wanted to find a way to build as many of those options in. Are there enough concerns around this at this level that first I'm hearing clearly that maintain it, but try to have it go first? Well, what if we can't? What if the option is not to go first? Am I hearing enough concern from this board that we should consider then pulling it as part of the event, or keeping it at the back end? And again, I'm trying to tease out here where we land on this. Is it a good idea that would be better first, or are we so concerned that if we can't move the structure of it or move the time of the event, that we should consider holding off on this?
Yeah, my feeling is that I would still try to reach out to the police department and see if we can sort of explain our collective reasons for not having it afterwards, and why they should think that maybe that's not a great idea as well. And see, to Katie's point, even if we moved it a half an hour, if we're worried about darkness during the ceremony. But I also think that you're going to have significant traffic crossing Route 1, parade or no parade, because everyone has to get to the fairgrounds, and
True.
3/4 of the town lives above Route 1.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the parade is seen as almost something more for the spectators, as well as for the kids, because there's going to be a lot of families that aren't, extended family members that aren't able to attend.
Yeah.
That this at least gives them a way to show their support. I do share the concern, as I stated before, that I think congregating in the dark at the high school after the ceremony is problematic.
Well, all right. I appreciate that. I appreciate hearing, and I appreciate people using the reaction buttons on Zoom. So that's great. But also, maybe I wasn't clear. The idea of this procession would be that we would head up to the high school. The high school parking lots will actually be closed, right? The parade ends at the high school, but people continue past the high school on New England Road and then proceed home. We are not bringing everybody into the high school. That's sort of just the end point. So the way that we had described, the way the police had laid this out, is that we leave from the fairgrounds to the high school, but there's nothing happening at the high school. And in fact, we're not congregating at the high school. That is where cars then need to disperse. So I understand that there's still a concern about what that looks like as they disperse, but we won't be pulling cars into the parking lot and then saying, guys, you can't stay here. You're not supposed. That's not built into the design of this. It's just that the parade has to terminate somewhere.
But a parade implicitly requires an audience.
Yes.
And there's very low probability you're going to get an audience in the dark. I'm not sure how much of an audience you'll get at 5:30, but in any case, so I'm in my car, we leave the fairgrounds, and all we're going to do is sit in a line of 200 cars waiting to get to a high school where we can't stop and keep going, why would I do that? I would just go straight home.
Right.
Because there's no connection between one car or another unless there's some spectators that people are waving to. So I mean, you raised the question. If it turns out we think that the nighttime parade is not particularly functional, then maybe what we're really saying is that either if you can't get it early, we shouldn't do it at all.
And that's why I was asking the question, right? As I'm listening through to the concerns and trying to measure my level of authority and influence and ultimately decision making on this, that right. So I will certainly make the presentation that I'm hearing, that can we move it to the front, that it would be better and more functional and more logical and more celebratory up front. But I just, again, want to acknowledge the fact that on some of these things, we're not the final decision maker. And so this is a helpful conversation, and it's helpful to have those kinds of questions answered. It's exactly why I tried to frame the question that way. I think I have a good sense of where we want to land on this, and I will have that conversation first thing in the morning. Chief and I have been speaking about twice a day for the last several days.
And why does the parade have to have an end place? Like, why couldn't they just, I don't know, drive around the green and then head home? Like, why does it have to have a final destination?
Well, because the police escort has to escort them to us, right? At some point, where does the police escort drop off? And we talked about the green. Do you just come out and circle the green? Our logistical worry about that is that 280 cars will end up circling back on themselves. And so if we try to come out and circle the green, we will end up bumping into each other. If we just said from the fairgrounds up to the Congregational Church, it just felt too short. And so, and the procession was originally designed the way all of you are describing it when it was built to be the first event for a 9 o'clock event at the fairgrounds. So right now, you're all recognizing that we're trying to reverse engineer this component and keep it as part of a 6 o'clock event. So if we can't make it the first thing to occur at 5 or 5:30 for a 6:30 event, right? I'll work through all those options. But you're recognizing that it's an odd fit because it was originally part of option 1 that we tried not to lose with option 3, because people suggested it as a positive thing. But if it's not going to be everything we see it as, we either need to get it on the right side of the event, or we need to entertain the idea of dropping it, because option 3 is inherently so much more popular or a better fit that we don't need to force fit this appendage to it. So this has been a helpful conversation. I don't know what the end result will be, but we'll find out soon.
Yeah. I'm so sorry. This may complicate it. Do we need cars in a certain location when they get to the fairgrounds?
Yes. Families, seniors are receiving assigned parking spaces in the same way that they would receive assigned seats at the graduation. So we will literally have numbered spaces, and families will receive numbered dashboard tickets, and we will have staff on site to help them park in the right locations, so that when we call out groups of 20, they're coming out and all moving in one direction through the cars, rather than calling 20 kids randomly from all over the field. And again, it is to literally to limit the number of cars that students walk past as they move. And this has been a logistical challenge, but Dennis has been wonderful. Chief Hyatt has been fantastic. And again, I can't say enough how hard Rick and his team have worked to make this possible.
How are the assignments assigned? Is it alphabetical? Is it random?
It's generally mostly alphabetical, but student speakers who participate in the event are sometimes pulled out to be at the end of an aisle or along those lines, but it's generally alphabetical.
How do you think that's going to go over? Do you think people that are at the end of the alphabet are going to be extremely upset because a car's length is much farther than a chair's length at the green?
Everyone's going to be walking further than they would normally walk. The last student with a Z name always gets the largest round of applause at an in-person graduation. So I think this one will get the most honking horns. We've tried to maintain everything as close to the normal event as possible, both so that we can come as close to tradition as possible, but also so that we can say, that's the way that we always did it. We know it's a longer walk, but we tried to maintain it. We are making accommodations for students who may not be able to. The stage that we're using is not handicapped accessible. We're using the band, again, I mentioned we're using the band shell. So accommodations will be made, as they are every year, for students who may not be able to walk on the stage, but receive in front of the stage rather than on the stage. And we'd make those same accommodations for placement so that they would have a shorter walk. I mean, if a student on crutches isn't going to be placed way in the back row, we'll make those individual accommodations.
And Paul, is there going to be a large screen so
No.
that cars in the back would see it? No.
No, it's either stage or screen. And again, that's why we went for the band shell. It's taller. I think it's about 6 feet off the ground. We think, it is simply, it's not going to be as intimate or personal or convenient as on the green. We absolutely recognize that. I mean, younger brothers and sisters in the back seats aren't going to have as good a view as, so we recognize that. And we're just doing the best we can with those pieces of the event.
But the event is live streamed though, so they're going to be able to watch it on a streaming device, correct?
Live streamed and recorded. So yeah, you're right. You could watch it on a screen in your car as well as out the windshield of your car. That's a good point. I hadn't thought of that, John. Thank you. I was thinking you have it recorded when you get home, but yes, you could watch it on a device in your car, just as well as out your windshield.
Well,
That's
and
a good point. I hadn't thought of that.
as Linda wrote in our chat, could the radio station be played from cell phones instead of the car radio to save the car battery? There may be options that don't have 280 cars running in the parking lot at once.
Yep.
All right.
And that is one of the concerns that has been brought up about car-based events around the state and around the country. Some of the pushback to those events has been around the idea of idling cars for an hour. I mean, if it's hot out, people are going to be idling their cars. We're aware of that. Again, this is a series of compromises to try to get as close to tradition as possible, meet those priorities that the students helped us clarify in this last week, and just do the best we can. It's not going to be our traditional graduation.
I think that it's going to go a long way. Students marching in their caps and gowns with their names read, I think was central to both parents and students that we heard.
That came through clearly. That was the central message that we heard. And that's what I'm glad we took the time to find a way to fit that in. And that's why I agree with the prediction that this choice will be the choice that we get to, even if it compromises on some other elements.
All right. Well,
Kristen,
thank you. Go ahead.
The large screen is easy to add. You won't be able to see anything on it at 6 o'clock. So if we want, it's right. So, yeah, we can have the screen. The vendor that we've contracted has the screen. That just becomes the timing issue then. And to add the large screen, we don't want the students walking in between cars in the field after dark. So those are the competing pressures around that piece. But I like John's suggestion. I hadn't thought about that. If every family brings an iPad and a battery pack, you'll be able to watch it on a screen in your car. If not,
none of the students have mobile phones or anything like that.
Or battery packs.
Yeah, right.
No, they don't all have the extra battery that they carry around with them. No, not at all. Right. I think cars will have multiple screens going on inside the cars.
Paul, this is great. It's so impossible to think about all of the different components that go into planning this very bizarre night. And I think this is just excellently done. I'm really proud of you guys. Good job.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, I'm proud of the team for taking a really serious effort and then being responsive to feedback, right? You think that you've done a good job, and I appreciate that a hallmark of the way we do business here in Guilford is that nothing's carved in stone. And right, we thought we had done a good job, we heard some feedback, and now we've done a better job. And I am enormously grateful to the team for the way that they approached that. I do think it's a hallmark of the way we do business around here. I've been known to change a snow day call if it didn't snow. So I'm really happy that this is where we ended up. And I'm happy that we're giving kids the ability to make the final determination. thank you all for all of your help on this. I know that we've talked about this a couple of times now. I know that you all received a lot of communications as well. I appreciate all your support and time in this conversation.
Paul, you had another agenda item, I think, which is summer school.
Yeah, and so this is another important topic, and we're at a very different place in the design on this. So every year in Guilford, like in school districts around the state, we offer summer opportunities, and they tend to come in two different flavors. We tend to offer additional instructional opportunities to large groups of students, and I know in past years you have seen us talk to you about the engineering camps that we've run over the summer, or the instructional arcs that we take over the summer. And then there is what is known as extended school year, ESY services that are primarily provided to students with identified special needs. At 2 o'clock this afternoon, we received the revised guidance for summer school. There was a draft of guidance that was issued about a week ago, and at 2 o'clock today, on June 2nd, we received the updated guidelines for summer programming. It's 17 pages long. We have not digested all of what is in there, but what we can tell you is that summer opportunities are being thought of in two ways. Summer opportunities may continue to be done virtually from a distance, or we have permission to begin bringing students back into school settings physically as of July 6th. There are 17 pages of guidelines on how to do that, on what it would mean for class size, what it would mean for total loading of a building, what it would mean for the number of students and adults working together. There's actually guidelines and diagrams about how we would load school buses. And the bottom line is that we could only put about 8 students on a school bus, and in addition to a driver, we would have to add a monitor to every school bus. I've been in conversation with superintendents around the state. I know that Jason has been in conversation with special educational directors around the state. And in most school districts, extended school year will be delivered virtually and electronically. Right now, we do not feel that we would be able to meet the expectations laid out in all 17 pages. We've got worries about staffing. That would dramatically increase the number of staff that we would be required to bring in. And right now, we're concerned about even staffing at the levels that we currently staff at. Teachers right now are a little burned out, and teachers who generally or regularly take summer opportunities to work are beginning to explain to us that they may not be looking for work this summer. Additionally, we're not sure if staff members understand the guidelines and are feeling safe returning to work. And so some staff members that would normally volunteer to be part of summer experiences are telling us that they'd be happy to continue to support students if it's a virtual situation, but maybe not so if it's happening physically in schools. So we are continuing to look at the plans, but right now we are beginning to plan extended school year opportunities that will be predominantly virtual in nature. There may be some exceptions to that for individual students around individual IEPs, primarily for students who may be working on functional living skills or life skills and need to have some contact, person-to-person contact, to be able to continue moving forward with that sort of learning. That's not a final plan yet. Most districts don't have a final plan yet, but that seems to be where we are in the design at this point. We've spoken both with a number of parents who are also expressing conflicting opinions. There are some parents who are excited and maybe desperate to have their students start coming to school again. There are other students who have told us that they're very much not ready to have their students be back in the school building, and they'd prefer a distance opportunity. Parallel to that, and Jason can talk more about the ESY, parallel to that, we are very excited about what we're looking at around learning pathways that we plan on offering to all the students in the system. At this time, we are building 4-week modules, 2 at the 6th through 8th grade level, 1 at the 4th and 5th, or 2 at the 4th and 5th grade level, and then individual models that we're offering for K1 and 2-3, where students and families would be able to elect into these learning pathways. The pathways will be well, it's probably just easier for me to ask Aneen to go ahead and describe what we're looking at. What we're looking at is offering opportunities district-wide to every student K through 8. They could sign in to be part of these investigatory, almost hybrid experiences. But Aneen, it's probably just going to be easier for me to let you describe it rather than to do a poor job describing it and then have you clean up after the fact.
Thank you. Basically, what these are learning pathways that allow students to take the ownership over their own learning through a guided inquiry process. So these pathways are integrated subjects. So for example, one of them is about health and wellness, and it integrates language arts standards, math standards, and health standards. And a teacher would be hired who would facilitate these learning pathways, and they would front load probably a lot of the synchronous contact with students, and then the teacher would back off some and let the students guide their own learning and work their way through a pathway. As we've created the pathways now, there is a template outline that the teacher would be able to follow to guide them, and there is a hyperdoc which is associated with that pathway that would allow the students to access various resources and links as they work their way through the project. So it is a guided inquiry which culminates in some kind of project or product that gets shared with fellow students and with public and families.
One of the things that we're particularly excited about is, as we've built these summer sort of laboratory sessions in the past, they provide content for students over that arc of 4 weeks. So students maintain contact, they're getting content delivered, and they're building skills. But we've always used them as a way to look at instruction and pedagogy as well. So the design of these 4 weeks has been informed by the things that we've learned and the things that we've struggled with and the feedback that we've received from parents over these last 12 weeks. As these teachers go in and experiment with this different design, it increases the synchronous contact, but front loads it rather than saying you have to sign in to be with me at 9:10 every morning for 4 weeks. We're expecting that we're going to be able to pilot some of what we're struggling with and learning from these 12 weeks, which will inform and help us to support teachers when we do reopen at scale in September, whether we're continuing to need to do distance learning or whether we're trying to embed elements of it into what we do in person. So this is an opportunity for students district-wide to sign in, continue contact, and continue skill development, but also for us to learn about our teaching strategies and then leverage that as teachers return in September. What we don't know is we don't know when we float this how many students will sign up. So we're talking now and working on, we're going to offer these 6 different modules that students can sign up for. We're trying to figure out right now what the appropriate class size is for a distance learning. If 10 students sign up, great, we can run it and see what we learn from it. If 30 students sign up, is that too big to handle in a distance setting? And if 60 students sign up, will we be able to spin off and bring in additional staff to carry that load and meet that need? Or will we be needing to set caps and have registration be on a first come, first served basis? So that is one of the great unknowns, and we're working on trying to figure out how best to put this out when we present this to the community. Again, both of these are very much in the early stages of design, despite the fact that we only have 15 days of school left. But these are very much still in the early stages of design. I think I mentioned to you, we got our guidance about 5 hours ago.
11.
I will mention that I am trying to get on this weekly CABE Board of Ed chair meeting that's happening every week. And this is certainly something that schools across the state are grappling with, how to do this summer school thing. One of the things I mentioned to Paul is, in many towns, the day camps are using part of the school in order to allow the day camp to happen in a social distance environment.
Takes much more space. Yep.
And it takes more space, and even just to get into one of the many weeds that they have to deal with. Kids at summer camp are not going to be required to wear masks. Kids at summer school are, although I have not read the information that got sent today. So I mean, just all kinds of things that schools are trying to deal with, including how you hold a summer school if you have to bus kids 8 at a time in a single bus. I did just have a context question, Paul. How many kids do we serve in a more typical summer for summer school?
Jason, ESY numbers, what are they usually?
ESY, we generally recommend about 100 students in district, and our general attendance is about 85.
Oh, okay.
And then Anine, in the past, when we've run literacy instruction or the camp activities in the summer, those tend to be around 20 normally.
Yeah, between 20 and 30 typically.
Okay.
And
Thank you.
Yep, and Dr. Balistraci, to your point, the schools are also used in the summer both by the before and after care program, which becomes a day-long program in the summer, as well as by Park and Rec, who runs various Park and Rec activities. And that is creating a bit of the tension that's being expressed statewide, right? So if the daycare and the summer camps are filling the buildings with students who aren't wearing masks, it's making some parents and staff members who would be working in the settings where students are masked less comfortable being in those settings. We're also really just juggling a financial impact, right? We had budgeted a certain amount of money for summer expenses based on the numbers that Jason and Anine shared. And if the expenses in meeting those numbers on site end up being 2, 3, or 4 times what we budgeted going into this September, where we're already worried that we're going to be under budgeted, right? We're trying to be careful about not overspending in July and August before even getting into the school year, where we're worried about being faced with expenses that we don't know how we're going to cover. So we're trying to make sure that we meet student needs. We will meet student needs. But we're trying to do it in a way that is also responsive to the health concerns and fiscally responsible.
Paul, I was just going to ask about that since it came up. Where are we with discussions with Park and Rec and Guilford Center for Children?
They are both chomping at the bit to know where they will be and how much space we will be able to provide to them. They both know that they are going to have demand for their services this summer, and they know that they're probably going to need more smaller spaces than we normally provide. And so again, we keep telling them we need to get the information from Hartford so that we can design our in-house plans so that we then can tell you what we can afford to you. And the fact is that we are stretching them well beyond where we would normally have given them confirmation.
Of course, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're super patient. They're good partners. They always have been, but we're testing their patience right now.
I have a question. In terms of our ESY students, Jason, I'm sure just like with our regular ed students, there's some variability in terms of how well they're doing with the digital learning platform. And I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to make our normal numbers of 100 smaller and prioritize those students who may be more at higher risk because they haven't been doing well, with the digital platform, or because they're just higher risk learning disabled students that really would have a trouble not having the consistency of the face-to-face contact. Is there a way to cut down on our numbers and still have some type of ESY program in person?
So Mary, it's a very good question. All of the recommendations are made within the PPT process. So they're all made individually based on regression and recoupment and skill acquisition for students. So we take all of those things into account when we're doing that. For the month of March and April, we weren't holding PPTs. Since we began PPTs at the end of April, where a lot of that planning has occurred, we've seen an increase in requests for extended school year. Families are very pleased, I must say. I had a conference this morning with a parent who's very pleased with the synchronous and the asynchronous learning of the virtual format. I have other members who are dying for social opportunities for their kiddos. And so we're always making those decisions on an individual basis and as best we can. Generally, when we were looking at our numbers, we had already decided back in January that our date would be July 6th. So we didn't have to make any adjustment to parent notification of that. Our general class sizes are about 8 to 10 students in them with one teacher and one paraprofessional. Sometimes more paraprofessionals, depending on the individual needs of the students. Based on the new recommendations, we would be looking at class sizes of 3 to 4 if the students require one-to-one support, as well as the individualized teacher instruction. So again, to answer, can we reduce that? We do have families that choose not to participate. In fact, I'm meeting with the coordinators tomorrow, and one of my charges for them is to contact all of the families that are recommended to see if they are still interested in attending. If they are not interested, then asking that they send us, notification of their lack of interest. Some, as you said, some families are burned out at this point in time, and other families are looking for increased opportunities. And so again, we're balancing the needs of each student individually in accordance with their IEPs.
Yeah, but I think what we're anticipating in the net is in fact increased demand for the service, right? You've got parents who intuitively are thinking, we missed school, so I need more of the summer opportunity, even for students who wouldn't traditionally avail themselves of summer opportunity. You certainly have advocates who are encouraging families to request additional services through the summer. I mean, you're hearing some of that on the news if you're following the news about special education in this time. So it would make sense on the one hand to try to reduce and prioritize. On the other hand, we may have more people seeking or asking for the service. And again, more people asking for the service, and we have to have smaller groups. So if you think about it, if you've got twice as many kids requesting the service and you can only have groups that are half the size, we've quadrupled our staffing cost. And so that's all of the juggling. There's certainly some parents and students who are burned out and who would normally be asking for summer services who are bailing out. But I think the net is actually an increase in requests, not a decrease. Would be really, it would put us in a challenging position, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one of my concerns is whether there's some pent up, desire, in this community for, for more services, given that there's been distance learning. And I don't know if you're getting that sense at all, Jason. Maybe you're not. But as Paul just said, whether advocates are sort of, talking to parents and saying, hey, you're not getting enough, you're not getting it. And then is this summer, plan, continuing a digital platform going to just sort of exacerbate that idea that they haven't gotten enough or that they've lost skills because they haven't gotten the face-to-face contact?
Yeah. And Mary, if I can, I think it depends on the individual student. I've seen kids with social emotional disabilities and anxiety thrive in this format. Kids who were, school phobic and unable to attend school, really thriving and doing
Right.
well. And then we have students who are developmentally disabled, who we all recognize that there is a need to increase as quickly as we possibly can, keeping in mind, ensuring the safety of all of the kids. So again, it's a blend, but I do agree with you.
Yeah, no, I was thinking more of our kids with LD and developmental delays and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So The other item that is floating out there is reopening writ large, and we are not ready to start presenting on that topic with you tonight, but know that there's a lot of work that is beginning to gear up for that, right? The calendar for us will be graduation, summer programming, and then the reopening of schools writ large. And we don't have the guidance on what that will look like at this time. But that will be the work. And I think that is why these additional meetings are going to be really important. And if tonight is an example, they will be really helpful for us as we continue wrestling with those three big ideas over the next coming 2 months.
When do you think that you will get guidance on the fall reopening? I mean, if we need to have, for example, a substantial increase in the number of buses and bus drivers we have available, I mean, we're going to have to give the bus companies some time, notice, some time to come up with these resources. They're not going to be able to do it in a week.
I think soon. The last that I was aware, the task forces that were meeting to discuss reopening were shut down or put on hiatus. I believe that the State Department and the governor feel that they collected a lot of information and opinions, and I believe that they are working on finalizing some final set of guidelines or some draft guidelines that are going to be issued. The summer school guidelines were issued as final. The State Department got a lot of feedback on them and issued revisions today. We're going to continue watching. I think soon, but I don't know if soon means this week or 2 weeks. We will continue having that conversation. My next conversation that I'm planning to be part of that I know will include the commissioner is on Friday morning. So he'll be meeting with the governing board of CAPS on Friday morning, and I can guarantee you that that will be one of the first 3 questions he's asked, Ted.
As I think about this, when I think about it and don't get totally overwhelmed, one of the things I think we'll have to be very careful of too as we move forward is if reopening guidance points us in a direction of some extra spending around who knows what, and then something changes at the end of August and we are forced, I mean, with the virus, right? Yep. Or something changes in October or November, that we have, what am I trying to say? That we have somehow contracted for extra services that we then don't end up using, right? I mean, it just seems to me that we're going to want to think about that when we're thinking about everything else around this.
Right now, the approach that we're trying to take is that we are trying to plan parallel in 4 different scenarios all at once. We're planning on what opening would look like if we were back in some probably hybrid fashion. We don't anticipate being back 100%, but predominantly back. We are planning for what it would look like if we are predominantly distance and maybe some elements of in-house, but mostly distance. We are planning for what happens if we come back and then need to close again so that we're in-house, but then remove to another closed situation. And we're planning for what happens if we have to start in a distance fashion, but then return to an in-house. So we're working on 4 different plans, all of which are hybrids to some degree, but all of which are significantly different, and where the hybrid sits and how prioritized the distance component of that is. We are hopeful that we can begin general planning on all 4 of these, and as we get more information, we'll be able to drop 1 and then 2 and hopefully 3 of those options off the table and only bring 1 of those 4 scenarios to final detail level. But again, if graduation and summer school have been challenges, then the reopening is going to be significantly more challenging. And the only good news going into that is that we've got an earlier start, but it is orders of magnitude more complicated than the issues that we're wrestling with tonight.
Aneen, independent of which of the scenarios we start out with, there are some things pedagogically and curricularly that could be done across the scenarios. For example, if we move to a much more project-based kind of instruction, which would work in any of those scenarios, even if we went back full-time normal, there are things that perhaps we've learned through the use of distance learning that we could realize allow students can take on more responsibility, more independent, asynchronous learning that we might want to do now in any case. And especially would be useful if we can't go back to normal, and would be useful in the worst case scenario, which is online. Is there conversation about those kind of things that might make us look different no matter how we go back than the way we've been?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the benefits of doing these summer learning pathways, because that's exactly the type of instruction that we're hoping to infuse as we go forward. So we're actually hoping that whatever teachers decide to participate in this are going to be able to then take that learning and knowledge back to their schools and really support the promotion of more inquiry-based and project-based learning. And it's definitely been on my radar for quite a long time. So I think we're moving in that direction. I think trying out these summer pathways is really going to be a big step in that direction.
I think that's the key question, right? I think that is exactly what we're looking at. And depending on which way you look at it, what do we need to learn and what do we need to infuse in everything that we do as a survival component over whatever next year is going to look like? Or what did we learn from this forced experiment that has been fantastic that we want to make sure we hold on to and we don't lose when we return? And it will be elements of asynchronicity that we can continue to hold on to. I was in a conversation with another superintendent. Those of you who have been on the board for some time have heard me say that it is frustrating that we can't offer seats in our Arabic classes to students at hand and have them offer us a commensurate number of seats in their Mandarin courses that they offer. What we're realizing now is it doesn't have to be hand that we partner with, and the busing restrictions that have always been one of the stumbling blocks may have just gone away. We simply need to let things settle down to the degree that we can start having conversations about teachers who work under our contract who now offer 4 of their classes in person, but 1 of them is done in a way that is more project-based and more asynchronous, as Aneen just described. And when we get there, we can offer that class to students all over the state of Connecticut who can get credit and place it on their transcript wherever they live. And in exchange, East Hartford can offer us 10 seats in their Mandarin course, and our students can take it from a study hall in Guilford High School or at home if it's a combination of synchronous and asynchronous opportunities. And so those are the silver linings that we need to find regardless of what this happens. I'm just finding myself, and I've shared this with a couple of you, more and more concerned about surviving the logistics of the next 6 months and not losing the enthusiasm for those silver linings. Whereas 3 or 4 weeks ago, I thought we were going to begin netting the benefits of those silver linings in September. And I'm recognizing now that it may be a little longer before we start reaping the benefits of this, because we've got more challenging time to work through. And how do we do that and make the best out of that piece? I'm still struggling with the idea that, remember, some of the options that are out there for September are half-day sessions where students are only receiving, they're receiving in-school schooling, but it's 3 hours a day. We do not know how severe the impacts of this are going to be. There are suggestions out there that our older students may not return from distance learning in September, that it may be a much later return. So we need to start thinking not just about how that's going to impact the schools, but how we start messaging and having those conversations with our community, because there are enormous family impacts that are connected to those sorts of decisions. Families who may be watching this tonight or recorded on YouTube, thinking that we will be returning at scale to what we were in March, this September 1st. I know that there are families who haven't thought thought as far as all of you and as we have, we may not be returning to school in September in a way that is familiar to us, and families need to begin thinking that through. And I know that that's going to be upsetting to some families who haven't started having those thoughts yet, but that's just another reason why these additional public conversations, I think, are really important over the next several weeks, so that that message starts being heard by our community. That was our agenda for tonight. I really do appreciate, I thought maybe we'd be through in an hour. I miscalculated.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think these are conversations that the board would like to be part of. I think that it's important for our community to know that the board is a part of these as well. You know, we have varying connections with part of the community, as you just said. They can hear from us about what's happening. They can watch and find out. I think this is important. So I certainly appreciate your time, the time of the administrators on the call. This is a time where we need to be in the loop more than ever. So.
Well, and we recognize that you all didn't necessarily sign up anticipating a 2-hour meeting every single week all through the summer months. So we really do appreciate the fact that you guys are stepping up and making yourselves part of these important conversations and difficult decisions. It means a lot to have the support of this board as we go through this work moving forward.
And I just want to say again, Paul, to you and Rick and the rest of the administration, thank you for hearing, students and families in regards to the ceremony. I think option 3 on the table will be well received, and I think it's perfect.
Thank you.
All right, then I will
Bless you, Linda.
entertain, God bless you. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, I see Amy raising her hand as a second, Ms. Sullivan second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone. Have a great
Good night.
night.